Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's USD alumni event, Diversity in the Performing Arts, featuring Jessie Perez, Director of the Shiley Graduate Theater Program. My name is Megan O'Rourke, and I'm the Associate Director of Regional Programs for the Office of Alumni Relations at USD. I'm also a proud member of the class of 2015. I have the pleasure of working with our 23 domestic Torero clubs across the country, including the New York Torero Club, who is co-hosting today's program with the College of Arts and Sciences. Although we are physically apart, our amazing club committees are hard at work putting together and supporting virtual programming for our alumni to keep them engaged with and connected to the university, in addition to keeping them connected to one another. Special shout out to New York Torero Club committee members who are on today's call as well. While today's event is set in New York, its virtual setting allows Toreros from all over the country to join us for this important and informative conversation. Thank you to those who have joined us and for those who will be watching at a later time. Speaking of watching at a later time, this event will be recorded and available on the USD Alumni Association YouTube channel later this week. Friendly reminder to keep your lines muted when you are not speaking and to switch your viewing preferences to speaker view so you can see Jessie and Noel more clearly. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Noel Norton, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Dean Norton has served as the Dean of the college since 2013. She joined the USD faculty in 1994 and previously served as Associate Dean, Co-Director of USD's Living Learning Communities Program and Director of the Honors Program, all while maintaining her faculty role in the Department of Political Science and International Relations. Under her leadership, the College of Arts and Sciences has opened an interdisciplinary student-centered humanity center, led the revision of USD's core curriculum, and implemented a successful diversity postdoctoral program. Dean Norton's championing and promoting of humanities as a central element of a liberal arts education, as well as her long-standing career at USD as a faculty member and administrator, makes her one of USD's most cherished deans by our students, staff, and alumni. Dean Norton, the stage is yours.
Megan, I think I'm going to have you give my introduction everywhere. That was my favorite yet. So I'm going to do something that's probably irritating to everybody, but you don't have to, but it would be lovely to see your faces but again, you don't have to. But I recognize names there and it's always nice. So I'm going to introduce the topic, and then I'm also going to introduce our speaker or the person we're going to interview today. So today's topic is diversity in theater, and our guest speaker is one of the newest hires at USD and in the college, Jessie Perez. Our team in the college hopes to lead cultural understanding that creates a better society, but we have a lot of work to do. We know that, and that's in part why we decided for today's theme and our other alumni roadshow events. And since you don't have to travel to those places, click in and see the different things that we're talking about. We're going to have a diversity related theme, exploring it across a variety of topics. We chose New York as the location to kick off this roadshow series of diversity topics, with the topic being theater. But you're going to see when we hit the Northwest, we're going to end up talking about, for example, environmentalism. We're talking about the things that are appropriate for the different parts of the country. So you might be interested in those other areas as well. Just check out the website for the alumni relations, and you'll see the different topics. New York, though, has become a hub of the arts and the nexus of theater worldwide. So I do hope you look forward to hearing about its significance and influence and challenges in the world of theater as much as I am. So Jessie Perez, I'm going to introduce him now, is an actor, director, and choreographer who joined USD in 2018 as the director of the Old Globe and University of San Diego Shiley Graduate Theater Program. And he is now the holder of the Craig Knoll Endowed Chair for that program. Prior to his tenure at USD, though, he was a guest artist and faculty member at the Juilliard School, where he choreographed and directed and taught for 12 years. So we're just so happy to have him with us, such an accomplished new director. So Professor Perez will address the topic of diversity in the performing arts as it relates to the list of demands by We See You White American Theater, a document that calls out all systemic racism that exists in the industry and in theater training programs. This document, it has inspired Professor Perez to create the Social Justice Action Plan that holds the MFA program accountable in being an all-inclusive training program, telling everyone's story through the diversification of USD student body, faculty, and staff. He'll also speak about his own experiences, and I'm happy to hear about this, so excited to talk about his own experiences in the industry as a Mexican-American from East Los Angeles, including his rise through historically white institutions and how through the guidance of the right mentors, he became the program director for one of the top actor training programs in the country with us at USD. So I can see Director Perez is there with us, and I want to thank him for being here today and taking the time. We wish we could have brought him to New York with us. It's always my favorite trip. But I'm going to just start by asking questions, and we're just going to chat. Jesse and I, when we get chatting, we can take up more time than Megan wants us to take up.
Right.
We'll be careful. I'm just going to start from like the beginning of your life. Why don't you start by telling us how you got here in this Zoom room? Not today, but how did you get into acting? What's your personal story?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Noelle. Thank you, Megan and Monique and Erica, who invited me. I'm really excited to talk about what's happening in the industry, even though I know it's really crucial conversation that we're having, important, critical, and I think it's important that we all look at ourselves, as we move forward. And I'm going to start when I was 10 years old. I think it starts with a story about a dancer who then becomes an actor. And what I mean by that, I was born in East Los Angeles in the late 70s. And I moved to the City of Commerce right outside East LA rather quickly because my parents were afraid of my elder brothers getting involved with gang warfare. A lot of gang members were approaching my brothers, they were becoming teenagers. And so my parents moved to the City of Commerce, which is a great little city, with recreational parks and stuff like that. But there isn't a lot of commerce there, it's just a lot of families. But we all would get together, at the Rosewood Park. And I went to the Rosewood Elementary School. And I used to play soccer a lot at Rosewood Park. It was a recreational team. And I'd go over there. And it was like when I was 10 years old, one of my close friends, I remember his name was Oscar Moncayo, came over to me and he was like, hey, we do this dancing thing over at the recreation center towards the weekend. We work on Fridays and Saturdays. And you should come check it out. I think you'd really like it. And, at first I was like, what is this guy talking about? That's not sports, right? And so I was like, hey man, since you're my friend, I'm going to go with you, one of these weekends. And so I showed up to this little hall in Rosewood Park. And sure enough, and it's interesting because all of these people were Latino. The director of this performing group, his name was Adolfo Marquez. And he was also a recreational leader and worked at the park. And so he had this performing group where basically we did a lot of show tunes, I say we, but the first time I got there, I was just an observer, while my friend Oscar and all of these young kids started to do Grease, right? But it was like a review. They didn't only just do Grease, then all of a sudden they were doing Evita, and they were singing and dancing. And I hadn't really been exposed to theater, right? Especially musical theater. And so at first I was like, oh, what is happening? But I did feel this rush of energy come through me. And of course, Adolfo Marquez came over to me after like the hour and a half long rehearsal, and the kids were sweating. And I was all of a sudden, I was like, oh, this is kind of like a sport. And so he came over and he goes, what did you think? And now, mind you, I was really shy, but cocky at the same time. So it was a weird combination because I was like, it was all right, but of course he was like, would you like to be a part of something like this? And I was like, I think so, because I like to play sports. And he was like, I guess this kid, he'll give it a shot. And I got involved, Noel, and when
Mhm.
I got there, it was a lot of Latinx and white, students, but it was mostly young females,
Mhm.
girls, and like 3 to 4 boys and like 10 girls, right? And so I was like, what is happening? But I started concentrating on the movement as kind of a sport. And I started getting really into it because it released my body in a way that
Mhm.
I was like, okay, things are moving inside me. I'm feeling things, I'm singing, I'm dancing. What's happening? Right. And I wasn't a very good singer. So a lot of the times they just have me keep my mouth shut and kind of keep a smile on my face and just dance like crazy. Right. So we started taking technique classes, ballet, tap, jazz. And all of a sudden, we started performing for like corporations. They would invite us to events that they would hold. And through doing all of this, eventually, the Magic Music Days by Disney caught up with us, and they hired us. So we started performing in Disneyland at the Carnation Land Plaza, Tomorrowland Terrace, and there we were, just kids performing and being backstage at Disney and seeing the characters take off their heads and just being like, what is happening? Really great adventure. But as we kept doing this, eventually they called us and they were like, hey, we want you to come to Walt Disney World in Florida. And
Oh.
so we went to Florida. My family went to Florida and they were chaperones, and we were there. We started performing at Disney World. And they called us again and they were like, why don't you go to Euro Disney? So we went off to France. And there we were overseas, and we started performing. We did a European trip. But while we were doing this, I was like, I don't know how much I'm feeling this. I was getting older. There was a lot of ballet involved. I mostly liked the hip hop classes we took. And so I went up to the director and I said, hey, I think I'm doing the wrong thing. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I said, well, I kind of want to do what Charlie Chaplin does. And me and my father used to watch old Charlie Chaplin movies all the time. My father's Mexican American, and when he came over, he didn't speak any English.
Mhm.
So the silent films really drew him. And so I would watch these amazing films with him, and I just fell in love with Charlie Chaplin. I used to have pictures of him, in my room and stuff. And eventually, Adolfo Marquez looked at me and he goes, well, that's dancing. And
Mhm.
I was like, no, wait a minute, something else is going on.
Yeah.
He's telling a story. And so I don't know what research Mr. Marquez did, but he drove me to the Stella Adler Conservatory of Acting West, which is a big institution in actor training. And
Mhm.
Stella Adler was still alive. It's one of the great American acting techniques. And Sandy Tucker was running the program at the time, at least the teenage division. But I was one of the youngest, and it cost some money. So luckily I had this money that I had saved up with working with the mouse, and I brought all that money and started doing acting lessons, right? Or I thought, so when I went in to meet Sandy Tucker, she was like, why do you want to be an actor? And I was like, I want to tell stories. I was totally a kid. But that's the birth of all of acting. I want to tell stories. And so she goes, okay, well, I'm going to ask you to do something before you get into our program because I want to see what you can do. And I was like, okay. And she goes, I want you to go home and get a book called Great Expectations. And I was like, okay. And she goes, and I want you to read it and do a book report. And I was like,
Okay.
oh no, right? So of course, and I kind of liked school, but all of a sudden I was like, okay, I really have to concentrate on this thing if I want to be an actor, I guess, right? Or Charlie Chaplin, I should say. So I bought Great Expectations, and the book's like about that big, and it scared the dickens out of me, so they say. And I opened it and I started reading this thing. And of course, it took me close to like 4 months, and I was reading it every day and trying to understand it, and it blew me away. So I wrote the best book report I could muster, as this teenager. And I remember taking it to Sandy's office, and Adolfo Marquez would drive me, there every weekend. And so I took it to the office and I said, here, I wrote the report. And she got the report and looked at it and went,
Oh, no.
ripped it, and she threw it in the trash can, and she goes, "You're in the program." And I was like, I got blown back, and I was like, oh no, what does this mean? Who am I? What's happening? What is acting? Where am I? But I was blown away that this woman made me feel this way, you know? And eventually she looked at me, and she goes, welcome to the program. And she extended her hand across the table, and I shook her hand. And then she looked at me and she goes, now shake my hand like a real man. And I was like, oh no. So I try to grab firmer, you know, and then she goes, there you go. And I didn't know what was happening, Noelle, but I knew that I was in the midst of a lioness. And
Ah,
I just wanted to be like, how does she have this power? What happened? What is this training? And so I started taking acting lessons with her. And sure enough, you know, we started basic, like 5 questions. Who am I? Where am I? What do I want? What are you doing here? What time is it? All of that stuff, right? But we started working on this play by Lillian Hellman,
mhm,
which is called The Children's Hour. And the Children's Hour takes place in an all-girls school with teenage girls and 2 female professors that, you know, there's a lie told about them that has an inch of truth that they're in love with each other,
mhm.
and it becomes truth. This little lie becomes the truth, and it destroys the entire school and the lives of these women and the men that they're with. So we started to play some of the teenagers, and there's this teenage girl, if I remember correctly, named Mary. And, you know, Sandra goes, so Jesse, you're going to play Mary. And I was like, so right away, I was playing a different gender. I was playing a character. I was Mary. And she goes, I said, but this is a girl. And she goes, oh, I know, but she's as powerful as a boy. And so I started doing the scene. And once again, there was a lot more girls than boys in this class. But I started to learn so much, Noelle, you
Mm,
know, and what broke my heart was that I could not afford it. I couldn't afford it,
mhm.
you know. And if I went over to my parents and I was like, hey, I'm doing this acting thing, you know, can I have like $150 per class or whatever it was back then? They would look at me a little crooked and say, what are you doing? What happened? You know? So I was a little shy. And also, like, as I started to dance, you know, I guess coming from the Mexican culture and machismo, my father was like, I wonder if my son's turning gay, you
Mhm.
know, and he started to keep a very interesting eye on me when friends would come over. Anyways, you know, I couldn't afford it. So I had to go up to Sandy and say, hey, I'm going to find a place that I can go and train for free. And through the research, I found out that there was a place called the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts.
Mm,
And it was free. It was a public school on the Cal State LA campus, but you had to audition, right?
mhm.
And it was my first, like, okay, here we go. Am I going to have to read another novel by Dickens and then tear up the, you know? So I was like, what's going to happen? But no, they asked for a contemporary monologue and a classical monologue, right? So I went in, and I think I did Malvolio from Shakespeare as my classical, trying to be funny, and I wasn't all that funny, right? But then I did Mary from the Children's Hour. And of course, the professors that were teaching in this high school looked at each other and they were like, you're doing the Children's Hour? And I was like, yeah, it's my favorite play. And so they got really interested. I didn't know anything. It's the only play I had read, you know? And so they were like, you're in. And I got to train at the Los Angeles County High School, LOXA for short. And I started to get technique under my belt, or so I thought, until you go into college and you're like, oh, I don't know anything. But as I was training there was a woman whose name is Penny Gerald, a Black professor there, who at one point, right when I got there, I was 15. I think the school started as a sophomore in high school. And I got there and we were in an acting class and I was doing a monologue. And she goes, okay, stop. You're so stiff. You're so nervous. You're so stiff. Your shoulders are in your ears. Why don't you move around? Start bouncing around. And I started to move around. And then she goes, why don't you dance? And I was like, oh, I know how to do that. So I
Mhm.
started dancing, right? And then she goes, no, too sharp. Make it messier. What are you doing? Start doing cartwheels. Stand on your head. Jump around. And just started making me move my body all over the room. Bounce off the walls. What are you doing? Push off that wall. Do some push-ups. Get up. Go down. Stand up. Turn the other direction. Full turn. And I was like, what's happening? And then after she goes, now stop. Now say your monologue.
Oh,
And the monologue just started to come out in a whole different way.
hmm.
right? And it was the funny monologue. It was the Malvolio monologue. And I stopped trying to be funny, and all of a sudden you started to get the true essence of this character through an exercise, right? And so it blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It blew my mind, and I was like, what is acting now? What does it mean to me now?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went up to this professor and I said, how do I do what you do? How do I teach? How do I get to act like that every time? You know, because I don't see actors doing that. They just kind of do it freely. And she goes, you have to go to college and you have to keep training. It's a technique. And you have to learn how to get that out of your system so that then you can do the work. And I said, well, where do I go? Where did you go? And she said, I went to Juilliard. And I was like, well, how do I go there? And she was like, you have to work your butt off. And so I was like, so the constant, I think, lesson was like, you have to work hard. You have to work hard. And of course, I was having fun working hard. You know, it was the idea that I was creating art and telling stories that all of a sudden I was like, I'm being taken and inspired by my own imagination. And all I have to do is continue working hard at that. How do I sharpen and detail that idea?
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked my butt off. I auditioned for 12 programs when I left high school, and I got into Juilliard because I knew it was what I wanted. You know, Carnegie Mellon turned me down, and, you know, one of my professors were like, I'm glad they turned you down so you could get some humble pie, you know, and I really didn't know what that meant at the time, but I think they were teaching me that it was going to be tough out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I got to Juilliard, and literally it was like the boot camp of training programs for acting. And I realized that I didn't know anything. You know, I didn't know anything. And so in that training program back then, they broke you down completely so that you can build back up, right? Of course, there's questions about that as we start training actors today, you know, but that was the rigor and the discipline that I got. I also trained in a lot of white curriculum. You know, I did a lot of Shakespeare, whom I love, but also Ibsen and Strindberg, and there was Shaw and Albee and Williams, and, you know, and I could go on, you know, and very little BIPOC playwrights. All that to say that as students, they created a playwright program. And as students started writing their own material, more BIPOC plays started to arise. So I started to join those new playwrights and started working with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's when I started to say, oh, is it all just a new work? Or can I do the classics when I get out of this school? And that was the big question that always landed in my head, you know, and it's how I got to New York. It's how I got into acting. I was a dancer that all of a sudden was like, you know what, I want to tell stories. And in some of my classes at Juilliard, they'd be like, you're moving too much like a dancer, right? And how I would strip that away to be more pedestrian and more human, if you will, right? Like doing, you know, brushing your teeth or washing your hands or sitting on a couch. And as easy as you think that sounds, it's really difficult. You know, a lot of people think that acting is like, oh, I can just get up and do it. But I wouldn't be teaching a 2-year training program and have gone to a 4-year training program to make sure that we do it the best to our ability. So that's my scoop.
That's how you got into it. So I'm going to come back to, so the way you got in is through scholarship and careful mentorship of your and observation of your talents. I'm going to get back to that in a second, but I want you to, how do we get you here? How did we get you back from Juilliard? And what interested you in leading our MFA program here at USD and with the Old Globe?
Yeah, well, you know, I started teaching at Juilliard through movement, right? Because I was a choreographer and I graduated and I started doing the acting thing, the freelance thing in New York and the regional theater thing. And then eventually a director that I was working with called me up and said, hey, I want you to choreograph this Chekhov play up at Lake Lucille, and it became the Lake Lucille Chekhov project. And I was like, oh man, you don't want me to play Treplev? I could play him, you know, I'm the age. And he's like, no, there's movement in this play I'm imagining. And I'm like, I don't see any dances in the Seagull, you know? And he was like, I do, and a lot of rock and roll. And so I was like, okay, let me go investigate this. And so I started choreographing for a man named Brian Murtis, who developed this amazing project. in upstate New York. And then eventually they gave him a contract to direct a 10-part Greek series by John Barton called The Greeks. And that was going to be a 3-year contract. And Brian called me and he goes, hey, come choreograph. And so I started choreographing at Juilliard, and through that, people started seeing that I could teach movement. They started asking me to do movement, and through movement, you know, Jim Houghton, who ran the program then, you know, rest in peace, he literally was like, hey, why don't you start teaching acting, you know? And I was like, sure, let's do it.
Okay.
And so there was a moment there where NYU started to get in contact with me, you know, about choreography and working with directors that were working over there. And I remember Jim saying, hey, how do we keep you? How do we keep you here so that that you become a professor here at Juilliard, and Juilliard has that special quality because you're teaching here. And I was like, yeah, give me an acting class. Like you said, you know, you want me to start teaching acting. And he gave me a 3rd-year acting class. He gave me Michael Kahn's acting class, right? And I was like, okay. So I jumped from 0 to like 60. You know, and I was like, here we go. But I started teaching acting and I said, what should I teach? Do I teach Shakespeare like Michael? And he was like, no, teach whatever you want. And I love the absurdists playwright, you know, Beckett, Lorca, Ionesco, Genet. And so I was like, I want to teach them. And he was like, go right ahead. So we developed an absurdist module in that 3rd-year acting class. And so I started doing that. And as I started doing that, Jim got really ill. And before he passed away, he talked to the director of acting at Juilliard, and he was like, "I want you to give Jesse a faculty position." You know, and so I was ready to be like, I don't know what I'm going to do now that Jim is slowly passing away. And Richard Feldman came up to me. And he was like, hey, Jim told me to give you a faculty position. He wants you to start teaching in the 1st year. And it blew my mind, you know? And I was like, oh man, I'm gonna get locked up in academia now. I'm gonna start teaching. I'm never gonna act. And he was like, no. We want you to keep acting. We want you to be a professional, and we want you to bring all that information back to us. And I was like, okay. And literally, Noelle, that happened 2 years before I applied to USD, you know?
When we locked you into academia.
Well, yeah, well, you guys didn't either, you know. I still have a professor of practice, so I get to do my craft and keep acting. But it was that thing where all of a sudden I saw opportunity, you know, and I knew that I got a phone call from a friend, a big mentor, and I know we're going to talk about mentorship in a little while. And he was like, hey, there's this opportunity going on at the University of San Diego, and have you ever thought of a leadership position? And that was the key word, I think, leadership. You know, I knew, like I said, there was a certain way people were getting trained. And now I was teaching in that institution that trained me. And now they were asking me to make change in that institution. So I knew that change needed to happen at the highest level of actor training. And I know USD has a very high level of actor training. And I was like, I wonder what it is, you know, to have only 14 students, to be in a 2-year program, you know, and how fast you have to get to the work, but also how it's a year-round program and how it's connected to a professional theater, one of the top regional theaters in the country. And so that's when I was like, I wonder if I can make change there. And honestly, I took it as an exercise. You know, because I didn't think I was going to get the job. I thought people were more qualified. They've had leadership positions longer than me. This was my first attempt, you know, but I gave it 110%.
And we're excited we have you.
But yeah, eventually I got called out here and I taught and I did the interviews and they gave me the position and I had to decide. And I was like, I want to make decisions happen fast. I want things to change because I could see it happening rather quickly. With just a little bit of an adjustment. Not a lot has to happen. And with the support of the faculty, with the support of you, Noelle, and the support of Barry Edelstein, I think we started to make change rather quickly.
I'm going to ask you a question about making change. Because I in my introduction, I talked about the We See You White American Theater letter. And so can you talk a bit more about how you're taking that letter and helping it restructure what you're doing at USD and with the MFA program. It's kind of what's your vision and how are you using that statement?
Yeah, well, We See White American Theater was first a letter that came out in June, and it was an alarm clock that went off in the entire industry. At first, people were like, what is this, and we're a little repelled, but it was like, we're a collective and we're gonna speak some truths and show you the white supremacy that is involved in our industry and how we have not been invited to the table. Might be a surprise to everyone, but there's more coming, And I know, the George Floyd murder happened in May. And so they were working already, this collective, and they released this letter in June. And then in July, a list of demands came out. And that scared people even more in the American theater, right? But as you sat with it and you kept reading it, you started to see what an important document it was, and what an action plan, and what a workbook that you could refer to when people started asking questions of where you're coming from. And finally, as BIPOC artists, we had a document that supported our fight, a document that spoke truths that we, as even BIPOC artists that were in the industry or teaching, were not aware of. We're taking for granted. We're like, oh, well, this is how it's done. Let's just do it this way. But they were demanding change, and it's a living document. That's what people forget, that we can utilize it and interpret it so that we can find the best practices in our institutions and move how we want to move with it. But there was a document of full support. And so all of a sudden, every theater in America had to answer to it. And we started investigating ourselves, and now I'm including myself in the Globe, staff and artistic staff and senior staff. And we started looking at ourselves. Now, I've only been here 2 years, but we started questioning programming, me as an educator. I started questioning the plays we teach, what's in our curriculum, what do we consider a classic, what's the alternate to that classical white canon? Why do we only study Eurocentric plays? Why hasn't there been a single BIPOC play in our season for the 34 years that our program has existed? So you start questioning all of that, and you're like, okay, I have to create an action plan because now I have support. Now we can actually start putting bullet points of change, and we can chart it. And if we hold ourselves accountable by making it in phases, 8 months, 16 months, and start actually seeing that we hit those signposts, then we start actually making change with a document that's holding everybody accountable. And we published it on our website so that people can see it. And we're updating it now because we have even a more diverse student body coming into our school, and I want to encourage that. That's the direction I want to head. So how do we create a safe environment, being supported by We See White American Theater, so that our BIPOC artists can have the same opportunities that white actors have had all their lives,
I've actually got two roles. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I work with you there, but I'm also on the Old Globe board. Yeah. And when I go to the Old Globe board, I try to put away my other job and think about theater broadly. And so when I listen to them, I'm hearing how much you are influencing change at the Old Globe as well. And so I just want to say I've been very impressed with what your influence has been amongst that group. I mean, not that they're not ready to go and willing and excited to make that change, but you've been a real catalyst for a major theater, regional theater. We're really glad to have you around.
Well, thank you. So, it also goes to kind of give it up to Barry Edelstein over at the Old Globe, who's trying to create that diversification of what's going on over there and actually doing the work and listening so intently, you know, and if we start talking about mentors, he's one of them, Noel, when it comes to
I was just going
Shakespeare.
to ask, he's one of your mentors because you met him at Juilliard.
I
So
did.
yeah.
Yeah, he taught a Shakespeare class while I was at Juilliard, and I just remember how passionate this man was, you know, and I was like, oh, you can use Shakespeare like that. You
Mhm.
can use it as a weapon. It can become this romantic sort of wonder as well, and you can stretch it and take it everywhere. And he started telling me and showing me how to think Shakespeare, which is his book, you know. And sure enough, it just blew my mind having his class at Juilliard. But when I graduated, he kept supporting me. He gave me one of my first acting gigs when he was running Classic Stage Company off Broadway, and I did a Philip Glass opera there. I didn't sing. You know, I'm not a good singer, but we did a Philip Glass opera, and I played Franz Kafka because we did an adaptation of In the Penal Colony. And Franz Kafka was kind of guiding the opera through as a sort of like fever dream, you know? And so I played him, and Barry was the artistic director of Classic Stage Company and allowed me to be a part of that amazing, amazing project. I'm a
Mhm.
Mexican American playing Franz Kafka, you know, and so talk about like opening my mind, you know. I know there was a question about Hamilton later, but I was just thinking like, oh, there's also that idea too. But I was just trying to transform. I was trying to figure out what it is to be other people while maintaining my authentic self in it as well. How do I fuse my DNA into Franz Kafka?
Yeah. Um, we were gonna go, and I should let you know this. We were gonna go into breakout rooms, but I got a private note in the chat saying that we're really enjoying listening to you,
Oh,
and
okay.
and so I'm still going to ask, not yet, one more question about how important it is to have scholarships to
Yes.
be able to do what you want to do with the students that you're trying to bring in. But I'll save that for the end. What I want to do is ask the audience one more time, if you'd like to turn your cameras on and ask some questions. I have some pre-asked questions, but why don't we, if you have anything you just want to ask off the cuff first, why don't you do that? I see Lucia Rutter there, who was in my class in you were in my class on the real 911 day, Lucia Rutter.
I knew I was going to get the call out. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I don't even have the light on. I'm sorry.
I know.
I actually do have a question. First of all, I apologize for showing up late. Jesse, it's been a delight to hear. I've been here for about 20 minutes, everything you've had to say. My knowledge of the program is actually kind of personal / professional. I work in teacher prep at Hunter College, which is part of the CUNY system in New York. And I actually had as one of my advisees a USD MFA graduate a few years ago. And he was at that point doing a second master's in the Lincoln Center Scholars Program, which is a fully subsidized master's to teach theater, K-12 theater in New York. So I'm wondering, what about what you just shared informs advice you have for K-12 teachers, and in particular, in light of the events of the past year in a district the size and demographic makeup as the New York City Department of Ed, white K-12 teachers, right? White teachers, like the alum that I worked with, to grow folks like yourself.
I'd say, you know, it starts with you all, like diversifying that K-12 curriculum, bringing in stories that we haven't been telling. You know, I knew when I went through school talking about Rosewood Park Elementary, you know, all of a sudden I didn't read a lot of, you know, BIPOC or people of color narratives or literature or even movies for that. You know, so it becomes that thing on like, how do we introduce young people into other people's stories and teach them empathy? It's through showing them the art, bringing it forward, you know, showing them those stories. And I know right now we're in a digital world and we're not allowed to gather and see theater together, but there is a lot of great online content. You know, I'm not only talking about Zoom, I'm talking about plays that were filmed, you know, American plays, American Shakespeare, which is what, you know, I want to teach my students. We don't live in England, you know, and I know he was a British playwright, but the truth is he I want to take him and wrestle with him, with who I am. Once again, fusing my DNA into that story. Otherwise, why is it important to me if it wasn't written for me? If it wasn't written by somebody that looked like me, you know? So as much as we tout Shakespeare, who I love and at times I hate, you know, and yet I lead this program because I'm interested in the struggle of that. I'm interested in having that conversation with my students who I always tell, hey, have more than one idea. It pisses everybody off. And so all of a sudden we have a conversation, you know, as opposed to it just being, hey, I'm the teacher and this is my perspective and this is what I've taught for 20 years and I know it works. Let me tell you, it doesn't work. It's not working. You know, there's a different way, and it's deep in our humanity of opening space to difference. You know, like I would want to live in an America where we go see theater because it's different, not because I see myself in it, right? That's the big thing. Like, oh, I'm going to go see this thing, but I don't see myself in it. Is it that great? I think that is wonderful because then all of a sudden we start knowing that we're not the only ones that exist in this America, on this planet, you know? And as much as we call the marginalized the minority, or the BIPOC the minority, we're the global majority. So we're behind on telling those stories. There's a catch-up period now. So I guess from K through 12, I just say introduce. Don't be afraid to diversify your curriculum, even if it's one new story a year. And then see how that story resonates and how it becomes a teaching tool that was far greater than you thought it would be. Give it a shot.
Great. Hi, Lucia. Oh, look, Heather Raffo, do you have a question?
Hi, Heather.
I do. Hi, Jesse. I so appreciate you. Really, so glad you're there.
I love you.
I love you too. Can you speak to the conversations around decentering Shakespeare and the pros and cons of that? I mean, I'll just so you know, I'm torn myself. I mean, I came into the field with only Shakespeare training, hit 9/11 and the Iraq War, and went, this is not speaking to the situation. Everybody's trying to, you know, make it speak to the situation. It didn't feel true to me, but I also love Shakespeare. But like in this moment and in where let's say the American theater is going, how are you handling that with your students? How are you handling it in conversation with a theater that is built upon, you know, is the Old Globe? So no matter what, its name is saying we are centering this, because I'm just struggling with it myself. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, you know, I would say he's the one we should be messing with the most. You know what I'm saying? Like, he is so public domain that we should stretch him and take him to task and question his own humanity. You know, because there's racism, there's bigotry, there's sexism, and you wonder, was he intending that? What was he thinking? Did he have blind spots? Should we point out those blind spots as BIPOC artists and be like, you know what? Let's highlight this, as opposed to, oh, let's cut it, you know, it's racist. No, let's bring it out so we can see the ugliness of humanity, you know, and it's who's playing the parts. You know, that's the big thing, Heather. Like and when we're dealing with Shakespeare, and all of a sudden, like I said, sometimes I hate him, and I just got to give him a break. Hey, you know what? I'm good with you right now. It's like a relationship. You know what? Let's call each other in a couple of months, years, even. You know, I love actors that take like 5 years from doing a Shakespeare play, and then they come back and they're that much hungrier. You know, because of the experience that they had for 5 years, because of the chaos. The terrible 4 last years we've all experienced, and this final one that we're going through, you know, what it means and what's being written. What are the new plays that are actually being written in isolation right now? I can't imagine, right? So I'm more interested in that, of course, but I am surrounded by Shakespeare at the Globe, at our school, in our curriculum, you know, and sure, I'm pushing against it, but it's how our program was built. So then it becomes that thing on, okay, Barry, okay, Noel, you all brought me here. what are you intending and what do you expect, knowing my own struggle and fight with it, you know? And I've done a lot of Shakespeare. I think he's the playwright that I have most on my resume. But like I said, there's a way that because when I look for actors, when I go on the road on recruitment, I'm not looking for that person that's giving me the classical take. I'm not looking for that person that's like, oh, let me be grandiose and let me pose. And, you know, it's like, no, okay, cool. You're doing that. Great. Where are you? Where are you in the text? You know, and ultimately, if they don't have a connection to the text, I'm like, okay, and there's a connection to the contemporary. You wonder if they can take heightened text and bring it down to them. It's not about us arching up to try to grab it and be like, oh, I got to be this white historical figure, which I'm not. It's like, no, let me bring this white historical figure down here, give it my interpretation, and see how the story flows through me, you know, so that I can bring myself to the story. And all of a sudden it becomes a story about a Mexican king, you know, a Mexican lover, you know, so I just wonder what that is, you know, and I'm just using the I because, of course, I'd love to see an Asian Mercutio, you know, an Indian Imogen, you know, stuff like this just really rocks my world, or a properly casted Cleopatra, right? Like we're casting Cleopatra White. Okay. So we have to start questioning what we're doing with this classical text. It's not about just like doing it, you know? And if people are constantly, you know, casting an all white production of Lear, you better have intention, because I don't know what that is anymore. And it doesn't reflect America. It doesn't reflect anywhere, it seems like. So it starts becoming the question on what stories should be brought to the forefront, those that we haven't heard because we haven't been given a seat at the table. Even if that table is this British playwright that everybody touts as the best. Let's see if he's the best, if he can take my interpretation. Because we usually give, you know, Eastern European or European people the full range of making crazy work that's abstract and expressionistic and, you know, pared down and everything. And then all of a sudden we have an American director trying to do something with that. And oh, hold on. I want to change that. I want us to be respected as much as those, as a Eurocentric director. You know, we can do that. We can push and pull these texts, and people can be like, oh, but, you know, I don't see it that way. It's like, well, maybe it wasn't your story, you know? And Heather, you taught me that, you know? It becomes that thing where it's like, oh, well, maybe I'm giving you a window into something different, you know? And I feel Shakespeare can take it, but we also have to change the gender. We have to let women be the king. You know, we have to let women guide this thing. I mean, that all, like, you know, the Public Theater is doing it. OSF is doing it. The Globe is doing it. It's like when they take that risk, which we all know is just a great swing at theater, all of a sudden we're like, I want to go there more. At least I do. But if I keep seeing a similar thing, or the same people saying what's on those stages, I don't know how much I want to go to that theater, you know? And so everybody has to do the work and start seeking help. Start figuring out who you can bring on your team so that you can get help on how to change that culture and actually make it a place of culture.
So I'm going to ask, I think we're getting down to near time. And I actually want to find out who's in the room too, because we didn't go to the breakout rooms. I just want to ask you what class year you came from USD, but I'm still going to ask my question. To make the change, to bring in the different people, to diversify at all levels, to change the pipeline across the nation, to bring people to the Hunter College for Lucia. Why are scholarships so important, Jesse? I mean, what is it that it becomes difficult for you in recruiting people?
That's a great question, because we're in the midst of it right now. We're trying to bring in our new class. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things that comes up every time is is your program completely free?
Mm-hmm.
And as much as we all know here, we're working at that. It's drifted from that. When the program, when it started, it was debt free. And that to me is what, like, how do we get back there? I know it's a different time. I know the program's been around for over 30 years, but I'm just wondering if there's a campaign that we can build, because it's a shame if people turn us down because they don't have the finances of living in San Diego and don't want to take out more debt from their BFA program, knowing that that costs them a lot. So if they don't get scholarship in their BFA program, they're diving into debt. And to be quite honest, if you want to come to our Old Globe USD program, you still end up like $17,000 in debt every year, and the conversation has started ever since I've gotten here on how we change that. We also give them a monthly stipend, that's supplied by the Globe and USD. But, we're also talking about how we double that stipend, because when you go to actor training that's conservatory based, you don't have any time to pick up another job, and work study is really difficult, because we usually start at 10 a.m. and we're not done till 10 p.m. And even now that I'm here, I'm trying to even add more classes, so it becomes that thing on how we make it the best conservatory training we can have in San Diego, and I'm just trying to figure out how we diversify by going to more diverse economically locations, how we go to Atlanta to recruit, right? Right now, we just go to New York, San Francisco, and Chicago. And
Not
if people,
LA?
and we go to LA. Oh, no, not LA. No, San Francisco. And then we do one in San Diego is what we do.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you don't have the money to travel to these places, right? And you're barely scraping by in your BFA, how do we go to them? And now Zoom has created a whole nother playing field. You know what I'm saying? This year, when we asked for virtual auditions, we got so many international students, so right away, this is a game changer. There are some things that came out of the pandemic that we could utilize. And so I'm wondering how we get scholarship for our BIPOC students that are turning us down because they don't have the funds, and it's been that way even in their younger ages, because people that go to training programs like Williamstown or Actors Theater of Louisville, you have to pay for that. You're paying to get trained as a teenager. And I didn't have that, I was looking for the free program. So sure, I would encourage all those artists that are like, oh man, I want to get out there to look for the free program. But I would encourage higher education, give that free program. If you want to diversify your student body, that's how you have to do it, because otherwise it's just the privilege. It's just the people that have money. We're only going to get people here just by the hair of their chinny chin chin. Sorry about that. Just slipping by, and wondering how they're going to get food. And we can't have that person. We want them to concentrate on the training. We want them to dive in, and we want them to fuse their DNA to the story. So
One of the things,
No, go ahead.
No, because that's going to be your last word. So I don't want to interrupt your last word.
Well, I just mean that, if we start building scholarships, we have to build them for all of them, all 14 of the students. That's the thing, So I know we're working on it, and I know there's going to be maybe a little bag that we put together. But once we get it together or buy that building to house them, our program is going to shift majorly, because it's already more than half BIPOC as we speak.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesse, Director Perez. This has been fascinating. I learn things every time I talk to you. Liberal arts is the commitment of the college, and anybody, I don't care, MFA program, business school, the foundation of all we do is with liberal arts and the work to eliminate racial inequity, and especially for those who want to participate in a liberal arts foundation in their heart and soul. So we're just happy you were here to see what we're doing for inclusion initiatives. Just a couple of the things that we have done for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Over the past 2 semesters, the college has initiated an interdisciplinary course around Black Lives Matter. It's actually called Black Lives Matter. And it's been offered twice this year, and it's going to be offered every year going forward. It's 20 professors we're going to do it online. It's Zoom Live, and we're going to keep doing it because it's been a great success. The college has also has a brand new award. It's called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Transformational Award, which we're going to recognize staff and faculty who have really demonstrated remarkable achievements in promoting anti-racism on our campus. We're going to award the first one this year. Beginning in fall semester, the college launches a new Africana Studies minor, and which will discuss and describe and debate the contributions of Black people around the globe. We're pretty excited about that. TJ Talley is new in history, is going to offer that, lead that. And I just want to thank you all for attending, and for Director Perez for his efforts and his passion for our theater program, and with all his help in helping the college and the globe shine. Megan, 4:31.
Right on time.
That was fantastic. That was what a way to close an event. But thank you so much, Director Jessie Perez and Noelle for leading that conversation. It was really interesting. I know I could probably speak on behalf of many people on this call that I could sit here and listen to you speak about everything that you touched on, and probably a lot more all day. So that was really, really interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. If you'd like to connect further with Dean Norton or Director Perez on anything that was discussed today, their emails will be included on the thank you email. Included in that email as well will be links for more information on the graduate teaching program, the Social Justice Action Plan, We See You White American Theater document, and ways to support the Old Globe and the USD Shiley Graduate Theater Program, because there's always an opportunity to support both of those programs. Also, if you would like to learn more about the Alumni Association, the New York Torero Club, or programs, or what other programs there are to get involved with the Alumni Association, you can also email me at meo'rourke@sandiego.edu. Thank you to everyone who logged on for today's event. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you at another USD alumni event soon.